That's right. That's right. Yeah. I guess one thing that happened this week is I did watch Jurassic Park 3.
Yeah. But we're just getting, I guess if we're there, we might as well get into it.
Yeah. I was going to say.
Welcome. You are entering into a strange dimension. A dimension where narratives from across space and time come together. Narratives that could have, might have, or should have been all exist here in one space. This is CineCasters Ultimate Timeline.
Welcome back to CineCasters. This is a show where we watch movies and pitch them back to one another to try and make them what we think is better anyway. You know, art is always subjective. My name is Andrew, or the Janglez, and I'm joined once again by my original CineCasters lineup with Nate.
Hi, I'm back.
Yeah. So the original CineCasters crew, maybe not the best, but certainly the most first.
We are definitely the most first. No one can take that away from us.
No one can take how first we are away from us. And today we are talking about Jurassic Park 3, the long-awaited sequel to one of the first movies we ever did on CineCasters.
Did you say long-awaited sequel?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you were referring to...
Oh, no, I was referring
to the CineCasters episode.
CineCasters episode, not the actual Jurassic Park.
Okay, yes.
After Jurassic Park 2 came out, I don't think anyone was super stoked for another one.
No.
And who can blame them when we have something like this to work with?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'll say before we do pitches or get into goods and bads, when I was writing my pitch, I did run into the same problem we had last time.
Uh-huh.
Which was the whole idea of, like, how to get a character who's already been on the island back to the island.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same problem every time. Like, I almost feel like in order to make this work, you have to either move the dinosaurs or you have to have a new character.
Yeah, I found that to be something that was a bit of a problem, too.
Yeah.
The whole, how do you get him back? Sorry, I'm just playing with the levels here. Let's try that. Okay, maybe that's better. Okay. Yeah, sorry, please continue.
The basic point was, like, I like Dr. Grant as a character, but, like, he says in the movie, like, not even, like, you couldn't pay him to go back to the island, and then he goes back anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
I tried to actually fix that in my pitch, but I found myself struggling, like, being like, how do you get someone who's already been to the island to go back to the island unless they're, like, properly motivated?
Yeah, exactly. That was something that I found was a bit of a problem with the movie too. That was pretty much the main problem.
Yeah.
And other than that, it was kind of like the movie was kind of a non-event. Yes, obviously things happen and that they have to run for their lives from these dinosaurs, but at the end of it, there's no real, let's say, I know this is cliche, but emotional journey for him.
Yeah.
He kind of he shows up, he does the thing and he leaves and it's like, all right, well, another day in the life of Dr. Graham.
Yeah, I had a thing where I tried to pull Dr. Grant through, but I don't know how well it worked out. But there's a couple things in this movie that really irk me.
Yeah.
Why don't you start? Like, goods and bads, go.
Yes. So, sorry, I just realized, is it Dr. Grant? It is Alan Grant.
Yeah, Alan Grant.
For some reason, why did I put in my pitch, I put Dr. Graham? Wow.
Maybe you wanted a new character.
Well, okay, maybe I'll just call him Dr. Graham. He changed his name or something. Here's a fun bit of trivia. So, this movie, one of the screenwriters on this movie was actually the writer and director of another movie we did on CineCasters. Can you guess which movie?
Yes.
You're never going to guess.
The writer and director of this movie also did Nutcracker and the Four Realms, which we just put out this week.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Joe Johnston.
No, okay. That's so funny. Okay, so no, that's not who I had in mind. So not the writer and director, just one of the writers on this also wrote and directed another movie that we did, and that was Downsizing.
Ah, okay.
So Alexander Payne, who I still hold is one of my favorite contemporary American filmmakers, was also one of the screenwriters on this movie.
But, I mean, that's a big... How many screenwriters were there for this movie?
There were 3, yeah.
You can always kind of often tell, like, how good or bad a movie is by how many screenwriters there are.
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, sometimes there are some movies where they have lots of writers and it works out. But yeah, I guess if they're cycling through writers over and over again, that would be a giveaway. I don't know all the ins and outs, but I didn't realize it till I was going through it on IMDb today, and I saw his name, and I went, oh, the same Alexander Payne.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a fun bit of trivia. So what I thought worked with the movie. I thought there were some moments that were, I was engaged, let's say. It wasn't, yeah. I don't know overall if I felt like it was watchable, but it wasn't like I was squirming in my seat. Like, I'll admit, there are some movies that we do that I actually skip through.
Oh, yeah, I get that.
I just go,
for sure, because you're just like, this is garbage.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so I'll admit The Grinch, I skipped through lots of it.
Yeah, because it's just not important.
It was just filler, yeah. With this one, I actually didn't feel the need to skip through it.
This movie almost has Indiana Jones syndrome.
Okay.
In that, and by that I mean Temple of Doom. In that, there's shots and sequences where I'm super invested, but overall, it's not amazing.
Yeah,
there are certain sequences and shots where I was like, yo, this is good. This is, I'm into this. And other parts where I'm just like, eh.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that I actually loved, and I'll admit, this is completely ridiculous and really stupid, and it actually brings the movie down, but I secretly loved it, is when Dr. Grant says, if the dinosaurs were not wiped out by a meteor, velociraptors could have evolved and become the dominant species on the planet. Immediately, I started picturing velociraptors wearing business suits, driving cars, taking work calls, going to coffee shops, and it was just, the mental image gave me so much satisfaction. I'll admit, it's a really weird part in the movie, but the joy it brought me personally is one thing I liked about it. But that's completely tangential to this movie entirely. Another thing that I thought worked for the movie, so the whole 3D printer thing, how that sets up a device that they use later on. Okay, so there's elements in the writing that they're able to put these seeds in that do come back. So they're not entirely, there is a sort of a structure to it. I thought some of the set pieces were interesting. There was in a technical aspect, there were some sequences that I thought were, more or less well done. Like the one where William H. Macy is climbing the crane and the dinosaur's trying to eat him, and then they light the water on fire. I mean, I thought that, it was kind of just standalone sequences like that I thought on their own were actually,
great.
Well done. Yeah. And I liked hearing the reprise of the John Williams score from the original. That theme, it's just such a beautiful theme.
All the themes, we get the park theme and the Jurassic Park theme.
Yeah, so, but that's kind of it in terms of things that I thought were working. It was really just, I mean, I can very quickly skim over the things that I thought didn't work. We basically touched on those. I said it was a very non-event. And it was essentially exactly what you touched on. It was a very arbitrary reason to get him there. It feels like, okay, we just need an excuse to go to the island so we can see these new dinosaurs attacking people. The only characters who really seemed to have any sort of emotional arc were the mom and the dad character, the Mr. and Mrs. Kirby. So there was no reason for him to be there. There was no character challenge or growth. He was convinced to go way too easily. And there were another really big thing that I brought down, but there were many conveniences in the story. Like, they show up on the island, they walk around for 10 minutes, and immediately they find the parachute. Where they could have easily just said, oh, they had a tracking device and we know their last location. Other than let's aimlessly wander around a forest. Oh, look, there it is on this massive island.
Yeah, this huge island.
And then suddenly, the other big one for me was this big Deus Ex Machina at the end of it, when the military can suddenly show up. And for the rest of it, now it's suddenly okay. They can, So that was really it. There was just a lot of conveniences, and there was just a lot of things that really were very arbitrary and convenient for the story. There you go. That's my spiel.
For me, it breaks down to 3 basic ideas, which is there's not really enough focus on the dinosaurs.
Okay.
There's not
interesting.
Not because
I would have said the opposite, but okay, please continue.
Well, by that what I mean is like the dinosaurs are sort of almost like the background. They're like the setting. Whereas in the original movie, it was like the dinosaurs are chaos. You know what I mean? The whole point is the whole point of the original movie is that a series of events has been set up. The storm, Dennis Nedry, the fact that they're at the park that particular day, like all of these are basically like series of events that set up the chaos of trying to control a thing that is inherently uncontrollable, right? And in that way, the dinosaurs add stakes to the chaos. I mean, they're both the result of the all these bad decisions, these chaotic happenstance, and they are the stakes. You know what I mean?
I see what you mean. Okay, you make an excellent point, actually.
Yeah. So what happens is like the dinosaurs, yes, they're the setting, like they're the background, like, oh, if we don't do this, the dinosaurs will kill us. But it's also like the dinosaurs are directly involved with the plot, more than just like we need to escape them.
Exactly. Like in this case, it could have been anything. It could have been like
zombies, an avalanche, giant insects,
a volcano,
a shark that sprouts legs.
Right.
So, you name it, we could
gnomes.
Yeah, really, like a bear.
Right.
If we wanted to get really mundane,
bears that ride sharks.
With
legs.
a faceless chainsaw wielding madman.
There we go. Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter.
So you make a good point. Yeah, in this case, it was the whole decision for it to be dinosaurs was also arbitrary.
Yeah.
Beyond the fact that it falls within a franchise called Jurassic
Park. Right? Yeah. So the matter of chaos, like the stakes and control in trying to have a dinosaur or control a theme park based around dinosaurs. That's the whole reason Malcolm's there. Chaos, right?
Right. Exactly.
And so for me, like not enough focus on the dinosaurs in terms of like, the dinosaurs need to be. I mean, the dinosaurs are also the reason the characters in the first movie show up, right? Everything focuses. Everything kind of revolves around the dinosaurs, even through the emotional drama and interpersonal relationships that the characters are having. Everything's along the backdrop of these dinosaurs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the reason the kids are there. That's the reason everybody is there, is because of these dinosaurs. So that for me, that's the way it works. This time, it's more like they're trying to save a kid in a place where people won't go. It doesn't matter that it's dinosaurs. They just happen to be dinosaurs.
Exactly. That's a good point. That's a very good point.
The second reason for me is that not enough people die.
Yes, and also a good point.
And I know that people are going to be like, well, that's a very morbid thing to say. And my reason for this is just, like, hear me out. On this particular instance, or I'll use an example. In the second movie, and we all know the second movie has its issues, but in the second movie, Eddie Carr spends 15 minutes using the Jeep to try and save the Sarah Harding and Ian Malcolm and his daughter and Vince Vaughn's character. He's trying to save them all from this dangling caravan, trailer thing off the edge. And he spends 15 minutes trying to do that, and he slows it down, and eventually he saves them through everything that he does. And his reward is to get torn in half by two T-Rexes. Mm-hmm. And this isn't because I think he deserves that. It's because, once again, we're back to chaos. You're not rewarded with good or bad. Nature doesn't care about whether you do good or bad things. Sure, all the actions you did saved our character, but you still got torn apart by two dinosaurs. To me, the problem with the biggest problem with this movie in terms of story is that Eric is still alive. Mm-hmm. I think it's Eric.
After 8 weeks.
After 8 weeks, Eric is still alive, and yet, however many scientists on the island in the second one can't survive, some dude has a taser and a rifle and walks off to go take a leak and winds up getting swarmed by compies. And yet this 15-year-old kid can survive 8 weeks? I know chaos. Exactly. I know chaos is chaos, but to me it would have been better if they found him and he had been like writing down, and then Dr. Grant was like, yo, this kid survived for like 7 days by himself before he died. That's impressive. But 8 weeks is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And not like unbelievable, like, whoa, that's unbelievable. Like, it broke my suspension of disbelief. Like, I can't.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting how it's like, there are certain things that as an audience we're willing to buy, like the bringing dinosaurs back, because there is a sort of plausibility to it, but somehow something like 8 weeks of survival, we just know there's no way. There's something about like the emotional implausibility that we find harder to believe than other like science fiction elements.
Like, even with the water truck and all the rations and whatnot, his ability to survive, not only without the dinosaurs, like his ability to survive would be drastically limited. Like, if he's never studied any survival, you know what I mean? Like, there's certain skills and whatnot that you need to have. And that, by the way, is also environmentally specific. So I've studied survival and like I teach outdoor ed, but I do this in a very specific biome in Canada. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm familiar with a lot of Canadian biomes and plants and animals, right? But like, if someone were to put me in Costa Rica, in the Costa Rican jungle, and be like, oh, you could survive, right? I'd be like, I have the basic tenets. Like, I know my pillars of survival. I know what I need to survive, and I know about like the 5 W's, like your wigglies, your weather, your all that kind of stuff that you need to watch for. But like, I don't know the environment. I don't know the ins and outs of the Costa Rican jungle, right? So that's going to put me at a disadvantage. But already I'd be more advantaged than Eric. And then you put dinosaurs on top of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? An inherently chaotic system. And he can survive? Like, no. I'm sorry, but no. On the grounds of survival and believability, just no.
Yeah, exactly.
And so then we have, like, the dinosaurs was my first. The second one was more people need to die. Like, the only person who really has a name who dies in this that we care about is Mr. Yudowski. When he sets the trap. And then Billy, you're like, oh man, his sacrifice, like, what a redemption when he like gives himself up to save Eric, because that was the point of the whole mission, especially after what he did with the eggs. And then they get on the helicopter at the end and he's fucking there, and I was like, it kind of feels wasted.
Yeah.
If we're going for like an emotional arc, he puts his life at risk. Even Grant runs after him and is like, no, don't. And I almost wish they'd had a chance to like talk, where he'd been like, yo, just because you fucked up doesn't mean you should like die. And then he like jumps out off the ledge, and Dr. Grant is like, you know, that was still a dumb thing to do. Like, you didn't have to sacrifice yourself. And then he dies, and you're like, oh, even in the end, like, he was willing to put his mistake, he felt his mistake so sharply that he was willing to try and sacrifice himself to save somebody else. But then at the end, when he like is alive, you're like, okay, I mean, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It's another convenience. One thing I do want to, just to be devil's advocate for a second.
Of course.
There is, in terms of, I do think you're right about that. In this specific environment, someone surviving for 8 weeks is ridiculous. But I'm thinking of the movie Aliens, where there's a little girl who manages to survive.
Yeah.
And for an undisclosed number of time. But it's also, she's not like out in the wilderness. She's in this, wherever it is, she's in this facility. And the idea is like, she's able to survive because she's able to be quiet enough that she goes undetected by these things.
Okay. Yeah.
By the aliens there. So, I mean, it's like, I was just trying to think about like, why did it work in Aliens and why didn't it work in this movie?
Okay. So for me, I think part of the big difference is like, if Eric had like buckled down, like stayed in his shelter, but like instead we get sort of this almost like Indiana Jones-esque character who like comes out, saves Dr. Grant with a tear gas, and then goes like, yeah, that's Tyrannosaurus Rex pee. You don't even want to know how I got that. Like, fuck off.
I guess it's sort of like, it's kind of taken for granted that we would just sort of expect, because there is some reference that he's read some of these books, so the idea is like, oh, he knows his shit, but that's, even that wouldn't be enough to explain how you'd be able to survive dinosaurs,
right?
Especially genetically engineered ones, as they appear to be in this specific instance.
Yeah.
On the Isle of Sarcasm.
On the Isle of Sarcasm.
Did you know that that's what the name translates to?
No, it's they translate to the five deaths.
Oh, okay. So for some
Nublar,
reason, I read
Sorna.
somewhere that it translates to Isle of Sarcasm in.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay, I'll have to fact check that. Anyway, sorry, you had one more point you were.
The
gonna
last
make.
point, the third point, is that this movie doesn't have enough John Williams. And by that I mean, like, the orchestration is done fine, but it doesn't feel as though the use of those themes was done appropriately. So even in the second one, there's a scene where Vince Vaughn is pushing the vines aside, and we see like the classic Jurassic Park logo, and we hear that sort of bum bum da dun 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 dun, and it's like buried in the background a little bit. That was like excellent usage of what they call the leitmotif, and I felt like there wasn't the same. The score was lackluster, and it shouldn't be from a Jurassic Park film. Not that it was bad. It's just like you have this amazing orchestration to work with and these amazing themes to work with, and you gave us very little. Even Jurassic World, I think, did a better job with the music.
Oh, interesting. I haven't seen Jurassic World yet.
Well, we'll get there eventually. But those are my three biggest points. Like where everything I think the problem with this movie stems from one of those three issues. And that's my big rant about Jurassic. What I will say that I did like is that they introduced different dinosaurs. But I like the whole idea. I thought the whole InGen, that wasn't on the InGen list of like registered species. I thought that was a missed opportunity. Like, why are you not doing anything with this idea of like InGen has species that were not on the list originally, and you're just gonna let that one go?
Yeah, exactly. They don't really do much with that, do they?
Like, I mean, you're just gonna let that slide. Like, the whole scene where they're in the bird cage and they introduce the pterosaurs. That whole scene is very tense, and it's very well done, I thought. Like, introducing a new dinosaur in like a new kind of set piece. I was like, this feels cool. This feels new. I just wish it had been in a better story. But where they're like going across the fog, across the bridge, like that felt I was like, this feels horror. Like, I'm on the edge of my seat. This feels, the last time I felt this kind of thing was like the tall grass in the second movie. So I did feel good about that. I mean, the whole egg scene where she like gives the eggs back and the dinosaurs like let them go.
That was a bit
I
of
will
a
also
stretch.
say, like, the 3D printing of the resonating chamber was cool, except I just wondered like how much of the resonating chamber would require flesh.
Right.
And Dr. Grant like knew how to blow into it. It's like we don't actually know like how the vocal cords or like resonating chamber would have worked. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly.
So
yeah,
a lot of that is like too implausible. Like, he's heard it before, but I will also say that I like that they make a distinction. They don't do enough with it, in my opinion, but they make a distinction to say that like the dinosaurs on the island are not dinosaurs, not the dinosaurs that we know. And by that I mean the dinosaurs on the island had missing points in their DNA, and other animals were used to fill them in. So yes, they may have like, they may technically be like dinosaur species in that like they have the features of particular dinosaurs, like the inverted pelvic bone that birds have, that non-avian dinosaurs have, and stuff like that. But they wouldn't have been the species that we would have known per se. And so when Dr. Grant says like, we're digging dinosaurs in the ground, those are actual living dinosaurs. These ones are actually remade new species of dinosaurs potentially. And so I was like, I think they should have done more with that too. So I tried to do more with that in my pitch as well as try and give Grant like an actual emotional plot through the whole thing. So, yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I did just look it up. So Sorna in Spanish is sarcasm.
Oh.
So Isla Sorna in Spanish does translate to
Well,
Sarcasm
there you go.
Island.
Yeah, the Isle of Sarcasm.
Which is...
What is Nublar then? Isla Nublar.
I don't know. I'm assuming New Island, but that's not
Yeah, it could be
new in Spanish.
Nublar. Born.
Nublar. Let's see. Nublar means...
Or is it just like a made-up word?
Could be. I'll have to look it
Yo,
up.
it wouldn't surprise me, maybe, that when they came up with the idea, when Michael Crichton wrote book 2, he called the island of sarcasm just to be like, I didn't want to write this book. And now I'm like, sort of his like subtle FU to Michael Crichton, or to Steven Spielberg.
Could be. Yeah. Nublar means clouded island.
Yeah, so there you go. I wonder if he was just like, I'm going to be sarcastic about this.
Yeah, exactly. I did wonder that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure who came up with the name for the second one, but that was kind of the impression I got.
Yeah. I also, okay, this is a thing that really pissed me off. At the beginning of the movie, they like tell each other to stop yelling.
Uh-huh.
And then later on in the movie, they're like continually yelling. I'm like, did we not learn our lesson from when the Spinosaurus showed up?
No. They, well, the other thing too, in terms of like a rescue expedition, it's very poorly carried out.
It's terrible. Like everything about this is dumb.
Like you would at least sort of have some kind of, you'd know they were paragliding, so you'd circle around and you'd go, okay, maybe this is where they went down. Let's find a landing strip close to that and make our way there. That was the other thing too. I was like, there's a much better way to go about actually doing this as a rescue mission.
I think the idea there is that it was supposed to be like everything about this was incompetently done. Because like you can see like Jack and Sarah, I mean, first of all, Jack as a character Paul as a character, Paul Kirby, is entirely like, he is like a what's the word? Well, like there's no reason for Sarah to be there, first of all. Like she doesn't really do anything for the plot other than like cause tension with Paul. And Paul is like so incompetent. He's just like it's almost silly at how bad he is at everything that he wants to be.
Exactly.
And they set him up as this like pathetic character, and I was like, I don't care about you. I don't even care about your son.
Exactly.
He should be dead.
Also, why did it take you 8 weeks to finally decide to go rescue him?
I mean, I'm assuming
that was the bit I couldn't figure out. Like,
I assumed like it was because of like
weeks?
the embassy and governments that they were trying to like wrestle with. I don't know. Who knows? But yeah. This movie ticked me off, but not in the normal
that's
way.
okay.
Like, it wasn't a terrible movie. Like, it didn't make me go like, oh my god. It was just sort of like little bits and pieces that stem from those 3 things that I talked about.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things that like on a first viewing, I felt watching it. I'm like, okay, something about it doesn't land.
Yeah.
I had to think about what those pieces were.
Yeah.
But it kind of came to me when we're like, okay, wait, why are we on the island? Oh yeah, why are we on the island?
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I think that's a good sort of deconstruction, is kind of what the pieces are, and you know why it doesn't necessarily work.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to start or should I start for pitches?
You know what? I'll start because I also know how passionate you are about Jurassic Park.
Yeah, I think I actually have a pretty good one that sort of solves most of like the drama and character arcs for each character. So
yeah, okay, that's good. You know what? So I focused specifically on Dr. Graham because he's technically the main character.
Oh yeah, mine's all about Dr. Grant too.
Grant. Yeah, it is Graham. Wow,
Alan Grant, probably one of, if not the most famous Hollywood actors who's from New Zealand.
Yes, he's from New Zealand. For some reason, I thought he was Australian.
No, he's a Kiwi. Have you seen Hunt for the Wilder People?
I have seen Hunt for the Wilder People.
That's why he's in that. I'm pretty sure it's because he's Kiwi.
But he was born in the UK.
That doesn't mean he's not a Kiwi citizen.
That's true. He is a New Zealand. Oh, no, New Zealand actor. Look at that. Wow. That's cool.
Yeah,
okay.
I thought that was cool too.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, because he was also in The Piano, right? Yeah, he was in The Piano. Okay.
He was also in a movie called Hunt for the Wilder People. He plays the dad in like a romantic comedy with what's her name from The Notebook? Rachel McAdams.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Can't remember what it's called, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Funny. Anyway, New Zealand. Dr. Grant, not Dr. Graham, is okay. So it starts off with him. He's giving the lecture on velociraptors. I have him say the line about how they could have evolved, but he says it as a joke.
Yeah.
And people laugh because it's funny and ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then he goes, seriously, but what determines who lives and who dies? It does seem somewhat arbitrary, doesn't it? Like, we look at evolution and think it's about survival of the fittest, when in fact it seems to be somewhat more survival of the luckiest, to some extent.
In terms of extinctions, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Stating the theme, sort of. So then it's like, okay, does anybody have any questions? Okay, does anybody not have any questions about Jurassic Park?
Yeah.
And when he sees people start putting their hands down, people actually get up and start leaving.
Yeah.
And so afterwards, he's back in like his office or something, and he's having a conversation with Ellie, the Laura Dern character.
Yeah.
And she's like actually still a professor at wherever they're working. Like, they work together. Yeah. But she's basically saying, like, look, nobody wants to hear about the science and all of the theories and the hypotheticals. They only want the spectacle of seeing dinosaurs. Yeah. Wink, wink, audience.
Yeah.
But they still work together. Anyway, what we see after this is that Dr. Grant has been having a hard time getting his research financed, and his life has become a bit of a mess. And it's sort of implied that part of this is PTSD, but he's also just like really down on his luck. And he's trying to do this like research, but he doesn't want to capitalize on the whole Jurassic Park thing because he doesn't want to go back and he doesn't want to revisit it. Anyway, there's a scene with him at a bar, and essentially what happens in this scene is he's there with some of his students, and they're just kind of hanging out and chatting, and then it's gotten down to like the last of the students, and it's him and a young woman and her boyfriend, and he's getting really drunk and he's hitting on one of his students. And basically he's kind of a mess, and they actually phone the Laura Dern character because they don't know what to do. Yeah. Because they're like, this guy's like, first of all, he's being a creep and he's drunk, and we're not entirely sure we can just leave him here. Yeah. So they phone the Laura Dern character, who shows up at the bar and drives him home. Anyway, he wakes up the next day. He's a drunken mess. Like, he's kind of like, oh, what did I do? But we see that his life is kind of like slowly unraveled, and he's kind of washed up. Anyway, somewhere in here, he gets a phone call, and basically it's the William H. Macy character, Mr. Kirby, explaining like I want to meet. And so he meets with Mr. Kirby and Mrs. Kirby, and they explain outright, like, look, our son went missing. And they explain it as like, in my version, they're still married. Yeah. But it was their son Eric and his older brother.
Oh, okay.
And they are actually very wealthy. Yeah. But the older brother is like a bit more entitled and actually does more reckless things. And he took Eric on this paragliding trip off the coast of this island they weren't supposed to go to. And they explain the whole thing, like, and they went missing. We know this is their last location. We can't get access. The government's not going to let us go. But we're going to try and, like, we've been given special permission to go and find them, essentially. So they actually have a team that's going with them. But because it's essentially they're going as part of the U.S. government, they're essentially trespassing on this land. So what they're doing is actually illegal. But they want Dr. Grant to go with them because he's actually been to that island. And in my version, they actually go to the island that Jurassic Park was on.
Isla Nublar.
Yeah. Because then he's actually been there and he knows the dinosaurs. Yeah. It just makes more sense to do it that way instead of dropping him in that. Why else would they go to him? But he's very adamant that he doesn't want to go. And in my version, it's the same thing. Like, they flash their checkbook out, but when he realizes, like, oh, and in my version, he reflects on it a little bit more, but he decides, like, okay, like, I have no other choice. Like, I have to. If I want to get this, like, I can no one's giving me money, but here's a chance, and this is someone, and I just go back, and there's going to be a whole team of people there, and they know where their son is, we find him, and we leave. And in my version, it's been like 3 or 4 days after Eric's gone missing. Like, they do it pretty quickly. Anyway, so they go back. As he's getting ready to go, the student that he was hitting on shows up at his apartment.
Oh, damn.
And basically says, I want you to bring me along with you.
Oh, damn.
And he's confused. Like, why? He's like, no, that's not a good idea. I can't bring you. And she basically says, like, and he's like, how did you know? And she basically admits to, like, well, I essentially, I got your banking information when you were really drunk. And I went in and I looked at your account and I saw that someone paid you a bunch of money, and I looked into who it was, and I did some sleuthing and I figured out that this is what's going on.
And I already don't like this woman.
Yeah. So he basically, and she's like, look, if you don't bring me, look, I'm going to tell them, first of all, that you were hitting on one of your students. And second of all, that what you're doing, you are actually illegally trespassing on this land. So he agrees to, like, bring her along as, like, as his, like, assistant.
Yeah.
Essentially. So, they fly to the island, they land, they get set up, they actually have, like, a competent team of people with them, and they're actually able to, like, have a location that they go to find they have a plan that's been set up.
Yeah.
But when they get to the spot, what they find is that the older brother is dead, but Eric isn't there. So now they're like, okay, well, now we have to go and we have to find Eric. And they actually have someone with them who's a tracker. But this is when things start falling apart. The raptor, like, they're essentially split up and they have to run away from raptors. And what they hadn't anticipated was that there were going to be as many dinosaurs on the island as there actually ended up being. We find that Eric's been able to survive almost a week by hiding somewhere, but he's very malnourished and weak. And I still wanted to keep the scene where, so essentially the way I have it is Dr. Graham, the student, and maybe some guards, they find Eric, and the Kirbys are in another group. And I liked the scene where they kind of like were able to reunify through the fence.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But the thing is they're not able to, like, that fence is there. In my version, they can't cross through the fence. They gotta keep going the long way around. Yeah. Also, their reunification gets broken up when the Kirbys get attacked by a dinosaur, and Mr. Kirby gets eaten by a dinosaur.
Oh, he did.
So he doesn't make it. Grant and Eric, so their plan is basically to make their way. The plan was always to make it, depending on where they were, they would either go back to where they landed or to shore, because where they were is closer to shore. So they're going to go to shore, and the other team's going to meet up with them at shore. So everyone's making their way to this sort of rendezvous point on the coast. They make their way to shore, and finally it's Mrs. Kirby, Grant, the student, and some bodyguards, and they make it to shore, but their escape hasn't arrived. Like, they're the only ones there. So they wait, and they basically set into action to, like, try and survive here on the beach. And some time passes, and they're like, okay, well, no one's here. What's going on? So what they eventually decide to do is they're going to either make their way back to the airstrip where they landed, or this communication tower that should still be in operation based on some research that they did. Anyway, this is where it kind of gets a little more muddy, but basically they make their way back through the forest, and here we reveal that, like, Grant basically reveals to his student that, like, him and his student are actually getting closer, having to survive. And he reveals that, like, at one point she basically asks him, like, why don't you like kids? And he's like, he doesn't really answer the question, but he's like, I had a shot at having a family once and he blew it. And he's referencing Ellie.
Yeah.
He's like, she wanted to have kids and I didn't. And I now look back on my life and I wonder if I missed out on something. And he gives the speech about astronomers and astronauts. He's like, I'm an astronomer, but I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be the one who's like going out and going in the field. But at a certain point, and I became successful. I actually had some success, but I started thinking at a certain point that it might not be enough. And now I'm starting to question whether it was ever going to be enough. Like I've just been running around on this treadmill. He apologizes to his student for being a creep, and she's also like, "Yeah, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry that I like took advantage of your, when you were drunk, basically." And we also learn that the Kirbys, the Mr. and Mrs. Kirby, had actually separated.
Yeah.
But that's not really relevant. I realized anyway, because he's dead now. He was eaten by a dinosaur. Somewhere in here, basically, we're now down to like Dr. Grant, Laura. Oh, that's the student's name.
Yeah.
Laura and Dr. Grant, Laura, Eric, and Mrs. Kirby, and essentially it's kind of like a family unit moving together. So this is essentially Dr. Grant. Now he's in a family of sorts that are now trying to survive in the jungle. So it's like this is like the thing that he passed up on, but now it's here. Is sort of in this kind of weird broken way, but it's now about survival and it has to work or they're not going to survive the jungle. But anyway, in my version, Laura attempts to save Eric in a less ridiculous way that's in the present movie, and she ends up actually being eaten by we actually see her get eaten by dinosaurs. So now it's down to Dr. Grant, Eric, and Eric's mom, and Dr. Grant basically has a breakdown, and he's like, he thinks about like, actually, Laura's here because of me. And he explains what happened. He's like, look, this is what happened, and she invited herself along, but if I hadn't done this and I hadn't figured out, like if I hadn't gotten my shit together, then her blood wouldn't be on my hands. Anyway, they get to the communication tower and they have to survive as the three of them while they wait for help to arrive. And just at the last minute, like raptors break in, they're about to get eaten, and it's like the gas canisters come in and they're rescued at the very last minute. Okay, now they're rescued from the island. And now we're back in America, and it's Dr. Grant, and he's being questioned by some federal authority, and the authority is asking him, like, okay, so what happened? And he's explaining, like, he just tells him, like, everything that happened. And then the federal authorities like, why did you bring her along? And Grant actually lies and says that he asked her to come along because he wanted a research assistant. And here's where the federal agent says, like, okay, well, one thing's for sure, Dr. Grant, you're lucky to be alive. Like, the reason you survived is
luck.
You got lucky. And he's like, and how much did they pay you? And Grant's like, I don't actually know. It's like, I can't remember. And then the FBI agent is basically like, was it worth it? That's where the scene ends. And then basically it's like Grant's basically, he's not sent to prison, but he's given a fine. His tenure is revoked. So he's even knocked down even lower than the beginning. And in the final scene, we see him leaving a liquor store. He's disheveled and he's like become an alcoholic. And Ellie passes him, picks him up and drives him home. And she's sitting in his living room with him and he apologizes. And he basically is like, I'm sorry, I never gave it a shot. I'm sorry, like, that you wanted this and I didn't want this. And I think back at that and I wish I'd said something different. And that's where the movie ends.
Oh, geez. You weren't kidding when you talked about having depressing endings. Wow, that's dark. But we get to play my favorite game with him, which is homeless or professor. In this case, both.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But no, man, you weren't kidding. Like, you really do like your darker endings. That's crazy, go nuts. Man,
I'll admit the part in my pitch that is weaker is the actual part on the actual island. That all those specifics I hadn't really worked out.
No, I thought it was great. I thought it worked.
It was kind of, I mean, I figured like you could have more or less the same thing on the island, just you needed to change the first act and you needed to change the last act.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, well, the solution is you basically give him this kind of this survivor's guilt.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Like, you sort of played more with the idea of PTSD. That just needs to come across more in when they're on the island, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, when he's on the island,
yes.
he needs to have, like, moments where perhaps, like, it's survival of the luckiest, like you said, where people are doing certain things that get them killed, but not him, even though he's having, like, traumatic episodes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's dark, man. So for me, Alan Grant is my hero. Like, I watched the movie before I watched before I read the book. In the book, Ian Malcolm is way cooler. In the movie, Jeff Goldblum plays him like very arrogant. Not that he isn't supposed to be arrogant, but he's supposed to be like, Jeff Goldblum plays him in that like over the top kind of way, where I think the point was supposed to be that Malcolm was like, he's very self-righteous in a way that's like, he's like, I'm not just smart, like I'm right, like I study chaos. If you do these things, there's no telling what will happen. And then when things happen, he's like, yeah, I told you this was a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so he comes across as like self-righteous, but Dr. Grant was always supposed to be like, I mean, he was my favorite character when I was growing up. So
okay.
That's why I'm a little bit
so
I don't know how I feel about that.
I just took your favorite character and I destroyed his integrity.
Gone, so I'm gonna
It'd be like if I did like, you like rewrote Lord of the Rings where Gandalf was like some creepy.
Oh, I'll tell you all about that. Gandalf is a dick. Okay. If you think of the Balrog as a boss character, he basically tells all the other characters to run so he can fight the boss character, and then he shows up later on at a higher level with new armor and a new title. He basically just killed the boss and stole all the loot from his friends.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Gandalf's an asshole D&D / game player.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, instead of sharing XP and loot, he was just like, it's mine now.
Yeah, I'm going to do this.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to get into my pitch where Dr. Alan Grant isn't an asshole.
Okay, yeah. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. You wrote your pitch, and it works. It worked. So mine, Dr. Alan Grant is giving that same lecture to a group of like sponsors at a visiting university, and so he talks about like the same kind of thing, and he can see like, he asks the question like, okay, any questions? And people raise their hand, and he's like, any questions that aren't about Jurassic Park? And then people put their hands down, and he's like, or the San Diego event, of which I was not present. And then people put their hands down, and somebody like basically asks like, okay, so why are you here presenting, giving funding when we know there are living dinosaurs on that island? Like, as soon as things clear up, we can just go to the island and see the dinosaurs. And Dr. Grant he makes a joke. He's basically like, how many people have read Ian Malcolm's book? And a couple of people raise their hand, and he's like, I'm not surprised. And there's like a chuckle about Ian Malcolm. And he goes, there is something in Malcolm's book that is important, because Malcolm had part of it right. He said, there was no way to predict what the world would be like if we brought dinosaurs into the modern age. But the part that Malcolm didn't have right was that those aren't dinosaurs. They certainly are like, have the features and a lot of the same, DNA. But when those dinosaurs were made, the DNA was filled in and created. It was owned by InGen. It wasn't created by life. The DNA was owned by InGen and is still owned by InGen, and that's part of the reasons why people can't get on the island. All the assets are owned by InGen. But the UN and the Costa Rican government, like they're all in sort of this lockdown in terms of nobody's willing to move. But those the dinosaurs are not true dinosaurs. They're just recreations to the best of what those scientists thought they could recreate. But the real dinosaurs are in the ground. That real work has to stay in the ground. That's why paleontology is important. The behaviors of these new creatures may be vastly different from the behaviors of the past dinosaurs. We may be able to learn something from watching them, but the real work has to continue in the ground. It can't continue, or we can't be watching a facsimile of what those dinosaurs were and claim that this is history, right? That would be poor academics.
Right.
And actually,
right.
we can see a few people in the audience are like, oh shit, yeah, okay, like maybe coming around. But the majority of people are like, okay, and they start to shuffle out. So afterwards, we actually see we saw Dr. Sadler in the audience, and she's like, oh my goodness, like how are you? They haven't seen each other in a while, because she was a no, I don't think she was a grad student at the time, but so like they're not together anymore. She's with somebody else, and she's like, "So what are you working on?" Or he's talking about, I've been trying to dig up raptors in the Badlands right now, and it's been going pretty good. And he's like, "I still wake up like with chills about everything that happened," but it's sort of driven him into this morbid fascination with them now, and like he has this need to prove that the raptors on the island are not the same as the raptors in the ground. As a way to like
interesting.
to solve his own like trauma about them. Like these are not the raptors that I know. So Dr. Grant returns to the dig site where we're introduced to Billy Brennan, who is his like one of the students that's working there that he left in charge, and that plays out the same. And then Paul Kirby and his wife show up, and they're extreme tourists, and they want to go to Isla Sorna. But Dr. Grant is like, look, I'm a dinosaur expert, but I've never been to Isla Sorna. Like I went to Isla Nublar, and they're like, no, we don't care about the site. We want to see the dinosaurs that are there. We want to know about the dinosaurs. We don't care about the site. And we're willing to fund your dig and even pay you and all your travel fees because they want you, and like we want you, and you're the best. And Dr. Grant's like, oh man, 8 years ago I was in this exact situation, and I said yes before, and a lot of people died. So my advice to you is don't waste your time with me, and don't waste your time going there, because it's a fool's errand. And just like it was a fool's errand to build the place, and just like that, it'll be a fool's errand just to go back. Not that you'd even be able to get permission from Costa Rica or the UN, because they keep that whole thing on lockdown. And Kirby's like, actually, we already have permission to go, and he pulls out the paperwork. And Dr. Grant's like, and he looks through it, and he's like, yo, this is legit. He's like, how did you even get this? Like, there's stuff from the UN here. There's stuff from Costa Rica here. There's stuff from InGen here. He's like, okay, InGen, I have a hard time believing this. InGen doesn't really exist outside of the name anymore. That's why, like, there's no one really, other than the name InGen, that's all that's holding on to the assets of the dinosaurs on the island, which means that it's been hard for anything to move, because it's basically just been a shell of a company from then on that owns the rights to something, and nobody can make them move, right? It's just been like, what do we do with this? And it's sort of been hanging there, and that's why nobody can make anything happen. But Kirby's like, I can't talk about it unless I know you're in. And Dr. Grant's like, okay, well, my curiosity is piqued, but I don't care that much. I'm not going. And then Kirby goes, look, tell you what then. I will triple my original, funding response, so you can have your, I'll triple what I was about to offer you. I'll even pay for you to bring one of your students as well. And Dr. Grant is like, let me think on it. So he actually calls up Ellie that night and is like, hey, I just landed, but I've been given, somebody wants me to go back, but they're willing to fund the site. And he's like, am I crazy that I want to go? And she's like, why would you want to go? And he's like, because I want to prove that those are not the same dinosaurs that are in the ground. And if I go, I can see the differences between them and what we know, and the similarities, but the differences. And she's like, I don't encourage it. And he's like, I think I'm going to say yes. I can't believe it. But he's driven by this need to prove that they're not the dinosaurs in the ground. So he actually says yes. So when the team lands, the crew is larger, and they set up a perimeter. There's more than just 3 guards. There's a full group of people. Yeah. They're also on the plane, and they're joined by a young woman named Haley McPherson, who Billy is like, oh, who's a very attractive lady sitting on the plane with us. She is a representative for a person named Mr. Masrani, who unfortunately couldn't join the group. And so she's like, I'm on the island in his stead to make sure things are going well. So Dr. Grant is like, this is a lot of setup just for sort of a tourist thing. Like, we're supposed to just like land and like, so they start setting up kind of a perimeter to make sure things are safe. And Dr. Grant's like, yo, this is efficient. Like, this is crazy. But he's like, okay, like, let's try not to, let's keep a low profile, but they're sort of not listening to him. And this starts attracting a few dinosaurs. So at first they start seeing some curious Compsognathus and some Gallimimus. And then a huge ankylosaur comes by, and Alan is like, oh, this is this animal, and you can tell, look at the distinct features, but actually that's not what they look like in the ground. They look more like this. And actually this is a feature that is not natural, or this species doesn't look like that at all from what we can tell. But he starts like pulling out what he thinks these dinosaurs are. And all the while, like, Billy is helping him out and taking notes, and Haley is taking pictures, like, and we can see that she's sort of like, we can even have like a cheeky reference to Sarah Harding from the first one, the way Sarah Harding was introduced in the second Jurassic Park. But you can see like it's all sort of commotion. But then, you know, Alan warns like all these dinosaurs are going to attract other predators, and that's when the T-Rex shows up, and it just trashes camp and starts like running after all the dinosaurs and the people. So they're running from the T-Rex, and after the T-Rex sort of like subsides, they manage to get away. They fall into the raptor nest by accident. And that whole thing plays out where Billy hangs back, and then they get separated when the raptors show up. So Grant is with Haley, who's like, this is after like the whole chase scene. Grant's with Haley, and she's basically in hysterics. She's like, I'm just a personal assistant. I'm one of 3 personal assistants for Mr. Masrani, because he's like that kind of billionaire. And he was like, I was basically told like he couldn't come on this safari, so I was told it was going to be like a safari vacation. All I had to do is take pictures and then keep track of what you were saying about which animal they were, and then I had to report back to Mr. Masrani. And Grant's like, yo, who is Mr. Masrani? And she's like, well, he bought part of, he's an investor, but he couldn't make it, so he like, and Grant's like, what kind of investor asks you to take pictures? And it's because Mr. Kirby, Mrs. Kirby, and Mr. Masrani have pooled their money together and bought InGen. So they own all the... And Dr. Grant is like, oh, no. Like, this isn't... Like, what? He's like, I don't know what's going on here, but I think I know what's going on here. And he's like, but that's how they got permission from the island, from the UK, or from the UN, and from the Costa Rican government. It's because... they own InGen, which means they own all the dinosaurs on the island and what to do with them, and they own all of the like the rental and stuff like that, and they've been paying it off. That's why they had to pool their money. So they bought InGen, and wow. By extension, they bought Jurassic Park. So meanwhile, Billy and the Kirbys and a few of the others are chased by the raptors even further. I think it'd be really neat to have a scene where they're like running and they come up to some really tall grass, and Billy stops and a few others of them stop, but a couple others go into the long grass, and we can and we can see them like, and Billy's just like, don't go into the long grass. You know what I mean? I think it'd just be like a cute reference. But so
no,
the meeting at the fence can happen again, and but like same thing when the T-Rex shows up. They don't just like find a hole. They see a door and they're like running towards it, like full out bolting while the T-Rex is catching up. They manage to get through the door safely, and it's all good. And they make their way. The T-Rex can't get over the fence or break through it, and they make their way to like a station. And we can have the whole scene where they're like getting food for the night or whatever. And then Billy turns to Haley and he's like, "Oh, you found my bag. Like, can I have my bag back?" And she's like, "No, it's okay. I got it." And he's like, No. Like, I wouldn't ask a beautiful lady to carry it. And she's like, okay, like, what do you mean by beautiful lady? Like, do you think I just can't carry my stuff? Like, I got here with Dr. Grant. Like, I can do this. You know what I mean? Like, I'm perfectly capable just because I'm like, and Billy's like, like, that's not really where I thought this was going to go, and not really what I meant. So, and then we find out, it turns out the reason Billy wants the bag back is because it has the dinosaur egg in it, and he's inadvertently been putting Haley in trouble, and he didn't want her to realize. And so she like flips on him, and Dr. Grant is like they have their own little thing, Billy and Haley. But then Dr. Grant calls Kirby out, like the two Kirbys, and he's like, you were just using me as a means of cataloging the species, so that because the official InGen list of assets was not the same as the internal list of assets. So the dinosaurs that are here, like Ankylosaur was not on the list. You know what I mean? Like some of these dinosaurs that we've seen are not on the list. And Kirby's like, yeah, we've actually been using you as a means of cataloging what was actually here on Site B, and not what was on the factory, not what was on the ground floor, but what they had been breeding, so that we could keep track of what assets are still alive, to see what money we had. And Grant is like, oh my God, like this is just history repeating itself. Like the rescue, he basically says, the rich people are basically think they can control the world if you put enough money into something. And then he sort of like an aside, but to himself is like, and why shouldn't they think that? Like, you know what I mean? This is the second time I found myself on this island because somebody waved enough money in front of my face. So of course you would think that. Of course you would think you can control the world through money. And the same thing happens. I didn't learn, and neither will you, because I'm in the same situation. And now it's the same simple arrogance that's going to kill them all, right? That same arrogance that built this place is the same arrogance that was going to kill them all in this place. So then they leave this place behind, and the bird cage like thing can happen. Billy can save himself to sacrifice the same thing, but he like hands his bag to Haley. He's like, here, take my bag. And he like jumps out but he does it to save Haley. And so she's like sort of like with his bag. But the entire time she's also been taking photographs of every animal as well. So then they find the boat on the river, and they're trying to get it unstuck, but like as they have to like be in the river. Like they can't just like, it doesn't just move. Like they're trying to push it out and haul it out, and it's like taking some time. And like Haley every so often is like, I keep feeling like something's watching me, or something's in the river. And Mr. Kirby is like, okay, there was never any water dinosaurs or anything like that on InGen's list. And Dr. Grant is like, you straight up told me the list was bunk. Right? Yeah. So we don't know what's in there. It isn't worth a damn anymore. We don't know what could be in there. It could be like non-dinosaurs like ichthyosaurs or mosasaurs. It could be, we have no idea. So the boat begins moving, and as they're speeding up, all of a sudden they see a sail come out from the water, and a huge crocodile-like dinosaur comes out, and it's bigger than T-Rex, and this is the Spinosaurus aegypticus, and it terrorizes them until they reach like more open space, and then all of a sudden the T-Rex comes out on the river, and the two of them are like fighting while they're trying to escape on the barge, so like over the river, and it's just this like massive sort of like fight between these two creatures. And then Grant is at this point is also trying to make the satellite phone work that he found on the boat, and so he finally gets a hold of Ellie and manages to they manage to escape the fighting dinosaurs by lighting the boat on fire and like swimming out of it to like distract them. But in the process, when they were fighting, the Spinosaurus actually drags T-Rex under the water. And Dr. Grant is like, oh, that's fascinating. Like to see them both like fight like that. Because if T-Rex had got its mouth around any part, its bite power would have killed it. But because they were fighting in the water, clearly like Spinosaurus had the advantage. And he's like it is fascinating, but we always have to remember like these are not the dinosaurs, right? They can tell us a lot about things, but so So as they follow the river, they're now following the river on foot. The raptors appear again because it turns out that Mrs. Kirby kept one of the eggs because she wanted proof of the investment. So she wanted proof of like an investment or something to be able to sell, even though everything was going to shit, to reverse engineer. And Grant's like, you have to leave it, otherwise the raptors like are going to kill us. And she's like, I'm not leaving it behind. Then the raptors attack, and her husband dies, and they wind up like, they're running again. They wind up inside like an old wrecked helicopter, maybe something from Jurassic Park 2, like as a reference to Jurassic Park 2. So in the wreck, they're basically still hiding, but they're like inside this old helicopter that's being trashed. And Dr. Grant says they're safer together, but if you won't leave that egg behind, like you're putting all of us in danger. Like, If I had it my way, I would say you're on your own, but we're safer together. You have to put that egg out. So she puts that egg outside, and the raptors do take it and then actually leave. And so they think they're safe. So after some time, they're like, wow, okay, it's safe. Let's go out. And so they leave the helicopter, but it's actually not safe. The raptors didn't leave. They were just waiting. And they pounce, and there's nowhere to go but the open savanna, or they run back towards the river. So they decide to run towards the river rather than get chased down. And in the process, Mrs. Kirby gets killed. And so it's just Haley and Grant now. And they swim, and they're swimming across the river, and they're almost at the other side, and the raptors are almost upon them. And then out from the bottom of the river, a huge jaw comes up, and it's the Spinosaurus, and it starts like eating up and smashing all the raptors and like fighting with the raptors as Haley and Dr. Grant get to the other side. And they're exhausted, and they see what looks like some kind of like signal or lights in the distance, and they start walking towards it, and they find a group of people waiting on the shore. And Dr. Grant's like, "Oh, did Dr. Sadler get a hold of you?" And they're like, "No, who's Dr. Sadler?" And he's like, "What?" And then they look over and see Haley, and they're like, "Oh, Mrs. McPherson, like, or Miss McPherson, like, we're here with Dr. Masrani. Like, did you get a chance to catalog them all?" And they're like, "Okay, cool, we'll take it from here." And they fly off, and it turns out like Haley is also like, I did get a chance to catalog them, but she turns to Dr. Grant and is like, "I'll send you all the pictures so that you can show the differences between the fossils and the dinosaurs on the island." So that you can prove like what you wanted to prove, that these are not the same dinosaurs. But at the same time, this is also a direct setup for the sequel, Jurassic World. Because
where they go back.
Yeah, because Mr. Masrani is actually the name of the person who's like takes in for for John Hammond. That's an direct reference. So this is basically all set up.
There you go.
So
it's a setup for Jurassic World.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, very nice.
I actually think this one was pretty good. There's a couple things in there where I was like, the dinosaurs still are kind of the impetus, but they could have been more important to the plot. And the hardest part, I tried to fix it with the whole like Dr. Grant being like, if you waved money at me and it worked. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But the hardest part is still why would Dr. Grant come back to the island? Right. Yeah. Yeah. So
exactly.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I mean, as a movie, I mean, I think it's. I liked. First of all, I was listening and I was like, oh, like the characters will actually die. Like there's consequences to being.
Oh yeah, only two of the characters make it out. It's Haley and Dr. Grant. Because I hated the fact that Billy didn't die in the end. I was like, no, you're gonna.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I liked that you changed it so that they're not going to rescue Eric. That it's part of an expedition to reopen the park.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you. I actually stole this from your idea from Jurassic Park 2.
Yeah, interesting. Because I thought about going that way, and then thinking like, what if they tried to do the same thing, but instead of bringing Malcolm, they bring Dr. Grant. I'm like, yeah, but that was my pitch with Jurassic World. I got to try something different.
Yeah. So yeah, your pitch for the Lost World was that, and I was like, oh, I think I'm gonna go that route because the next movie is Jurassic World. Mm-hmm. And if I had it my way, I'll say it, all together now. We'll say this should have been a TV show.
Yeah, exactly.
I would have made some more like side characters and side plots. Like I think it would have been cool to explore the relationship between Billy and Haley more, which would have been more fun. Like if you do it as a TV show and you say like this TV show is going to take place over the course of 3 days that they're on the island. Right, and like the first episode is them getting there, and then landing. The second episode is sort of like, and you're like, okay, over the course of these 8 to 12 episodes is 3 days, and like exploring the relationships of these characters as they're dying and being on the island. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, I felt that way when we did the Lost World pitches.
Exactly.
That there was, you could, because you're building this whole world. I mean, why not? It does, when you have a world, you can justify having a longer format.
Yeah. I also, at the same time, am wondering like what was going on Isla Nublar at this whole time, because this takes place on Isla Sorna. So.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. But I really enjoy the, I really like my pitch. I think it works really, really well. Better than the movie.
Oh yeah,
so
that was an excellent pitch.
Yeah,
that was an excellent pitch.
I know it's hard to describe when you're just saying it, but I really think the image of having the T-Rex be the one that's hunting them the most of the movie, and then all of a sudden have this bigger monster come out of the water with the Spinosaurus and then kill the T-Rex is like, that thing that was hunting us? There's a bigger thing that's now hunting us.
Yeah, it's a good way to elevate the stakes, actually.
And then at the end when the raptors are like trying to swim across the river to catch Haley and Grant and I have the Spinosaurus show up, that was supposed to be like in reference to the end of the first movie when
the T-Rex shows up.
T-Rex shows up, exactly.
Yeah.
But I just thought, like, I think it would be awesome to have them trying to escape. Like, on this boat, they're trying to escape while these two mammoth monsters, like, just gigantic dinosaurs, are fighting with each other. Like, they're not even interested in the boat. It's just these two mammoth dinosaurs trying to just, get at each other over their territory. Also, the thing that bothered me is Spinosaurus aegypticus likely, we don't know this for sure, likely was a water-dwelling kind of crocodile-like dinosaur. Crocodiles are not dinosaurs; they're reptiles, and they're distinctly different. But but the dinosaur like a crocodile was like Spinosaur, and we think it like worked in the water and like was very much like a giant fucking crocodile. So that's why I was like, I think it would be cool to have this like water predator. And actually, to also be clear, there's a scene in the first book, Jurassic Park, the first book, that is very like that with the T-Rex in the water. Like,
and Spinosaur?
No, there's no Spinosaur. But,
oh, okay.
Yeah. To me, the reason the Spinosaur was added to this movie was simply because it is bigger. It's a bigger dinosaur. And I feel like they were just trying to go bigger and better.
Yeah, so, that was kind of how I felt too.
Yeah, which doesn't make sense because like in an actual fight, which is why I had the fight take place on the water. In an actual fight, T-Rex is probably much more fearsome. Like it has a huge skull for huge bite pressure, we think. But based on like where we think its muscles went and its like tooth size, it could like crunch bone easily.
Right.
So, anyway, there's my rant about.
No, I love it. I'm actually looking up. Different comparison diagrams between a Spinosaurus and a Tyrannosaurus.
Yeah,
the
Spinosaurus is longer.
It's longer and also weighed more.
But I'm fairly certain that the Tyrannosaurus Rex would have beaten it in a fight if it could get its jaws around it. Like there's a point in the movie actually where T-Rex has its jaws around the Spinosaurus's neck. And I was like, there's no way. Like, if the T-Rex gets its jaws in you like that and bites down, you're done. Like, it would just crush the bone in the windpipe.
Yeah.
That bite power, man.
Wow. Spinosaurus would have been native to Egypt, actually.
That's why it's called Spinosaurus aegypticus. It's called the
Spinosaurus aegypticus.
Right.
And
actually, the other thing that I thought was that I didn't really get a chance to mention that now that you bring it up was I wanted Dr. Grant to say something along the lines of like, it's super interesting to watch these two creatures fight, but they never would have met because T-Rex is like from the Badlands of North America and Spinosaur is
Alberta.
Is in Egypt. And so there's geography, but also millions of years. Right?
Exactly.
I don't know what the specifics are, but I guarantee they probably weren't close in terms of like time frame. Yeah. Anyway, last minute thoughts on Jurassic Park 3.
No. That's it. Yeah. I got nothing more on that.
I got nothing more on it either. I could talk dinosaurs all day, but we should be focusing on movies and not dinosaurs. Maybe I should do another podcast about dinosaurs.
I mean, I appreciate how much you know about dinosaurs. It's impressive.
I'm like a wading pool compared to my brother.
Oh,
that
okay.
Dude is unreal. Unreal.
Okay.
Anyway, where can people find you?
I have a website. It's www.nathanieldraper.com or on Letterboxd at DraperNate.
Oh, you got that down to a science. You can find me at Robot Philosopher anywhere. That's my band. You can listen to us anywhere you listen to dope music. You can also find CineMasters on YouTube and on Facebook and maybe Instagram, where we've got lots of cool things going on, like our weekly podcast that you've just been listening to, or our video essay series called This Is a Thing, and bonus casts that come out all the time. And yeah, stay tuned to that, and we'll see you later.
Yeah. See ya. Have a good one. Stay safe out there.
Stay safe out there.
From those,
dinosaurs.